PGA Nation, we are back, and we are back at the FedEx Cup second round, heading to Colorado Castle Pines Golf Course. Should be an interesting week. 50 golfers, no cup, but it's the best 50 golfers. You had to qualify to make it this point, so it should make for some interesting builds this week. I'm excited to break it down, but we're coming off a hot week last week. David with a great tip, nailing Hideki for the win. I know you had to sweat it at the end, but you got your win. How you doing tonight, David?
I'm good, mate. I'm good. Shout out to Spence as well, who also had Hideki Matsuyama, but also had Victor Hovland. So it was almost a situation where he couldn't lose because it would have taken something incredible for Xander to have put himself further into the mix than he already did with an incredible final round. Yeah, it was one of those things where it's leaderboard gravity always comes into play at some point throughout the tournament, right? And that just so happened to be on Sunday. Hideki claimed that seeing the PGA Tour official come talk to him on the 12th had no effect on him. The evidence does not support that because he went bogey, bogey, par, double bogey for 4 over through 4 holes. Suddenly threw away the lead and looked like he was going to miss out. But then obviously clutch birdies on the 17th and 18th to hit yet another outright winner. So well done to everyone in the Win Daily Sports family. There's been lots of great chats in the Discord, lots of good betting slips and huge cashes coming in, as well as some big DFS wins as well, which you love to see. So make sure you take advantage of that 50% promo while it's still on. It's in the description right now. You can sign up. It's like $7.50 per week. So, I mean, when we're regularly hitting players like Hideki Matsuyama to win at 28-1 or more, depending where you were looking, you're making that money out pretty damn quick.
Spence, you were on a heater last week as well. Basically, as David said, on a win-win situation with Hovland and Hideki. Seeing things really well right now. Spence, how you doing tonight? How you feeling about this week?
I'm feeling good. You know, David and I were talking a little bit off air before this show started first of all, there's a lot of great information that gets produced on this show from what the audience has to say. There's so many great comments and tips that are just from within you guys and from the three of us, but it's interesting of how varying and how different that these lineups can become, because I was telling David, if I kind of big brained the theory last week of how I put it together, where I thought there was the world where if I put myself last, I could get Hideki Matsuyama with my first pick. But, you know, David was too savvy for that. He ended up grabbing him in the third spot, had Scotty Scheffler fall to me, which ended up being the right decision there. And I was kind of banking in a lot of different routes. Like when Scotty was on the board, I was hoping that there was going to be a real world where Hideki ended up following to me. But very savvy show, very savvy pick. But it's just funny how one little alteration, which is what's so great about this show because it forces you into different builds to begin with. But one slight alteration just makes a world of difference. And I think that that's what, at the bare minimum, this show ends up expressing, because there's so many varying routes that you can consider. There are picks that are not available to us where, you know, it's my fault to where if I had the ability to give myself the number one pick, I could have had Hideki. But, you know, when he's not available for you at the pick, it just alters the entire landscape of it. So David took advantage of what ended up being a mistake there. David, congratulations, ends up winning the contest based off of that. And, you know, we'll move forward into this week. I'm curious to see what order David ends up putting out. If you can learn anything, don't do what I did at the end of the day and, you know, give yourself the ability to actually grab the golfers you want. But with a 50-man field, we should have a good contest here. There's a lot to talk about with the new course here at Castle Pines.
All right. Well, David did win last week. He's got the order this week. It looks like we put it in. We're going to go David first. I am interested to see who he is eyeing for that first pick. I'm going to go second. Team audience, you will go third. Spencer, you will go fourth. Before we dive into the draft, as always, Spencer will hit us with the course breakdown. Spence, you got your work cut out for us this week. It's been a while since we've seen some golf at Castle Pines. What are you looking for in Colorado this week?
Yeah, there's unknown variables. And I mean, that's the thing I would preface before we even get into the discussion here. You're going to see this 8,130 yard measurement of this course. That's going to immediately draw into this narrative of it being a bomb and gouge venue. Maybe I'm wrong here. Perhaps this still ends up being the case, since we do at the end of the day have zero statistical data, as I've talked about, to pull from in this situation. But when I looked at this venue, I watched videos on it. when I ran projection numbers, whether it be top courses or things of that nature, I saw a much more nuanced property that is going to reward a much more complete outlook from within the bag. You have numerous risk reward holes that are going to accentuate that mentality. 10 holes possess water danger. You get tree line venues, blind tee shots, dog legs throughout, and then this multiple tiered green complex that is expected to play exceptionally fast on the stimp meter. I've seen 13 on it. You get a venue that likely reduces the initial build of distance to begin with because of the 6,300 yard elevation total. There's a lot of downhill lies. There are different ways to calculate elevation. At the bare minimum of it, it's about 10% that we're looking at. So that puts us more in this 7,400 range of what this course more or less is probably going to play. I would make an argument that it could even potentially be shorter than that just because of this downhill nature. There's going to be tons of drives. Like when you watch on a stat tracking or a shot tracking app, you're going to see 400 plus yard drives over and over again. There is danger because of the water. There's danger if you miss the fairways. And then I saw this fiery green complex that's going to present this second shot golf course that's going to need creativity and touch. So when I ran my model to summarize all that into one blueprint here, I looked at the basic comp projections of how players play in certain elevations of this threshold I'm looking for. I looked at projected comp courses. That's going to be venues like Muirfield Village. It's going to be Jack Nicklaus Designs, which is another weight that I had of Nicklaus tracks. It's going to be, I think there's some Augusta National feel to it. They've kind of labeled themselves as the Augusta National of the mountain range here. And then if you want to just look for elevation zones, there's a lot of this West Coast swing, my hometown of Vegas being one of them. There's Hawaii locations. There's multiple spots in California and Arizona where this same boosted elevation rate ends up coming into play. So I think the one thing as just a caveat that I would throw out there is be careful with trying to extrapolate out projections too far because we don't exactly know what this course is going to entail. But I think there's enough similar blueprints of when you look at Nicklaus Designs and elevation and where this is in the world and what we can expect based off of that to where we can kind of start building out a blueprint that is very course specific without the data to actually push us in that direction.
Well, there you have it. Definitely something you want to be educated on this week because of the nuances of this course. Certainly will be helpful. And it definitely is a way to differentiate yourself if you're playing in these big tournaments this week. But we do have a draft tonight and we will get right into it. For anyone that might be new to the show, don't forget to log in on YouTube. On YouTube, you can enter the chat. You can draft along with Team Audience. The way it works is your typical snake-style draft, like you do for any fantasy football draft, 1 through 4, and then the second round it goes 4 through 1. So Spencer on the wheel will get 2 picks in a row. You do need to stay within your DraftKings salary. So you can't just take all the best players. You do need to make sure you can afford each player that you draft and play your lineup on DraftKings. And if you log into YouTube and get into the chat, the audience nominates a player. Once that player is also suggested by a second person, and that is the audience's pick. And then we go on to the next pick. So without further ado, David, you won last week. You gave yourself the first pick. Who are you looking for to start this draft off?
I did give myself the first pick. And it's funny that, Spence and I haven't actually talked to each other about what we expect this golf course to play like. But it's interesting that we landed on the same sort of golf courses that we think it's going to play like. And for me, that was Muirfield and Augusta were the primary two that I thought were good comp courses. Obviously, the Nicklaus element at Muirfield and the tight kind of overall total driving nature of that course. And then Augusta with the elevation changes, but also bent grass greens and approach shots being a high metric as well. And then TPC Summerlin, TPC Scottsdale, a couple of courses at altitude were basically my 4 primary comp courses that I was looking at. So it's always very interesting to me how Spence and I might not even talk about the golf course, and then we end up with the same kind of recipe, which is very promising when you arrive at a venue like this where we don't exactly know exactly how it's going to play. For me, I'm actually going to be maybe somewhat controversial in taking my first pick because I'm not going to take one of the absolute top guys, but I am going to take a popular player this week who I think that if I don't take him in the first pick, I won't get him back to me. And that's Wyndham Clark at 9,200. Look, Wyndham Clark showed a resurgence of form last week. We saw him play really well at the FedEx St. Jude. Obviously, he's from Denver as well, so he's got those local links in terms of wanting to perform well in front of his home crowd. He would feel like this is a home venue, a home game for him. But we've also seen his ability when the pressure's on in these signature events, and when, like, I think for many golfers, it's hard to guess their motivation. But for Wyndham Clark, it's almost clearly that at these big events where the big money is on the line, that he comes to play. And we've seen that throughout the year. Now, he has the chance to move himself up to third, maybe even second on the FedEx Cup rankings, entering the Tour Championship if he has a good week this week. He's done it a number of times already this year. We've seen enough flashes of form recently for me to suggest that 9,200 is too cheap for him. So I'm happy to start my lineup build for the Denver local there, Wyndham Clark, 9,200.
I love that pick. To your point, we've seen Wyndham Clark playing elite golf this season, last season, as being one of the top players in the world. He had a little bit of a cold streak, but that form is coming back, and you want to ride a player when the form is heading in the right direction. It certainly is this week. I will definitely have some exposure to Wyndham Clark myself as well. But for my first pick, I am going to go in the direction of one of the top dogs. There's two golfers this year that are clearly head and shoulders better than everyone else and playing that way. And heading into this week, I think you want to get some exposure to those guys. I would be happy going either way here, but with the second pick, with both guys being available, I'm going to go ahead and nail in Xander Schauffele. And I honestly, as I was going through that little talk, I could have gone either way. I was still deciding who I was going to take. I think the reason why I settled on Xander is just strictly the putter. You know, we've seen him, have the ability to get hot with the putter, and you're going to need that to rise above in fields like this. Whereas, Scotty, while he's the most elite ball striker in the world, and it's unbelievable what he's doing, I just don't have as much confidence in him finding a hot putter, which, I think Scotty's safe. I think he's going to get you a top 10 regardless. But to win the tournament, really get that top result, I think you need to find a hot putter as well. And I just have a higher confidence in Xander doing that than Scotty. That's my reasoning. Audience, you're on the clock. It looks like the pick is in. You got the other guy. So great pick with Scotty. And I'll go to you here, Spence. Interesting way this round broke out. You got two in a row. Would love your take on the first three picks, and then how are you starting your draft?
Maybe this is a controversial take. Maybe not based off of what you just did, Joel, but I do kind of lean in the direction, if we throw ownership out for a second, like I would rather save $1,200 with Xander than to go up to Scotty. So I actually think you made the right pick there when comparing apples to oranges. For my pick, and I don't even know if I necessarily need to be this aggressive to start. I'm just going to lock up the two players that I want near the top of the board since, and kind of just build from there. So there are two golfers for me. I don't really think it matters which order I put these two in. The first name I'm going to go with is a golfer that I have taken quite a bit on this show, I would say over the last month, and really haven't necessarily gotten the results that I would be hoping for with him. There's been 3 straight finishes outside the top 15 on the leaderboard, miscut at the Open Championship, share a 40th last week in a 70-man field. But if you ignore, and this has kind of been the one thing that I have been pumping up the more that I dive into the data here, if you ignore Oberg's second round at the Open Championship, you get this extremely robust ball striking profile that is so much better than the results that he's putting on paper. So take those 9 rounds of some of the worst results that we have seen from him this entire year. He's averaged 1.16 strokes gained to the field ball striking. That includes a turnaround with the driver that's gained in 3 straight, an approach profile that has done most of the work to the tune of over 10 shots. You look at that 1.6 strokes gain number, that's about 0.10 strokes better than the 2-year baseline that I have on him in my model. That would place him behind only Schauffele and Scheffler. And then there's a positive trajectory in my model for putting on similar green complexes. So if the short game concerns are really what we are narrowing in on, and I think from an outright betting perspective, this is even a different conversation, because I always talk about that there's 2 things that I want in the outright betting market. it's one, a golfer who hasn't had his value decreased because of the results that they've put together. That's Hideki last week. Good trending form. That was a number that was too boosted in the market. And then you look specifically on the flip side of that answer, it's a golfer that's received a boost in the market because of a bad performance or two, or at least the perception of it being a bad performance or two. I see Oberg drifting the wrong direction. I've seen this number at Bet365 up to 27-1 inside the enhanced market. It just keeps getting higher and higher on that price. And to me, that's a mistake for a golfer that is in better form. I understand the concerns of the injury and where he's at right now, but I really like Oberg's upside for this tournament. And I'm going to pair him with another golfer that has seen so much popularity throughout the space. I didn't necessarily love him last week. He was one of the names I was lower on, but we kind of had this back and forth conversation with Xander specifically and Colin Morikawa, where they keep seeming to flip and flop back and forth into these positions to where, look at Morikawa at the US Open. He fell into the sub 15-1 range where he was a favorite over Xander in most of those markets. And now all of a sudden you've gotten Morikawa pushed higher if we're looking specifically in the outright betting market. But even if you just look at here for DFS, there's a price rebate that you're going to get. There's a horrible ball striking return that he put into play last week. Same answer can be said for Rory. Same answer can be said for a lot of these guys that just for whatever reason did not land correctly with the ball striking performances. I ran my data back to 2016 to see if I could find any example that fit. I will say Morikawa has never lost strokes with both his approach game and driver and back-to-back starts. The short game continues to be red hot for him. And if I am weighing accuracy a little bit more than the general public seems to be this week, I think this is a really nice course fit for him where it does seem like as an industry, people have jumped off of him because of one poor result, which, by the way, still landed 22nd while losing 5 strokes ball striking. So if the ball striking turns around, I think the upside is still there.
Wow. Well, first of all, audience, you're on the clock. We need 2. It looks like there's some nominations in. We'll wait for those to get finalized. But I will say that is definitely a pick stolen. I was planning to take – you'll be surprised. You'll probably think I was going to say Ober, but I was actually planning to take Morikawa with my next pick for the reasons that you said. You know, as well as his short game is, I don't expect Morikawa to continually lose strokes on his approach game. His irons are his strength. If that comes back and he continues to be red hot with his short game, you know, we've seen Morikawa have a great season. This looks like a good spot for him to bounce back. I think he's having a good week, and I definitely endorse that one. Audience, you got one in. Willie Z with their first pick, who I like. He looks like he found some form last week. I think that's a really good pick. We need your second as well. While we wait, David, would love your take on Spence's picks as well as Willie Zalatoris.
Yeah, it looks like Will Zalatoris confirmed for the audience. I would have liked to have him in the squad. He showed enough flashes last week when finishing 12th. Obviously, if we were looking at correlated courses, great record at the Masters. He played well at Muirfield as well. So if there is that uptick that kind of continues, do like that selection there. Bear in mind, he is going to be pretty chalky. He is very, very popular down in the 6K range. I'm seeing upwards of 14%, maybe 15% by the time that this is all said and done. So that's something to consider. Of Spencer's selections, Ludwig is a steal. I kind of figured that if I didn't go Wyndham Clark, Ludwig wasn't going to come back to me, and then vice versa. If I went Ludwig, Wyndham Clark probably wasn't going to come back to me. I just love what he's done on these comp courses in the few appearances that we've seen. He's played once at the Masters, he finished second. He's played once at Muirfield, he finished fifth. He's also got a 12th as well in there. So at TPC Summerlin. So like the three of the 4 comp courses, we've seen him play once, and he's played very, very well at all of them. I agree that I think he's in better form. And the other thing that stuck out for me was that his approach numbers, his driving distance all seems to be okay, which suggests that the injury is not too much of an issue. But most of the strokes he's losing have been around the green. Now, if you're doing that around this golf course where the water goes right up to a lot of these green complexes, they're 5,600 square foot greens. So if you're missing greens and needing to rely on your chipping game to get you around, I think there's bigger issues in play. So I do really like Ludwig this week, and solid selections all around. I don't think there's been anything too controversial at this point.
Boom. There you have it. All right. I'm going to go ahead and lock in Aaron Rai with my second pick. At 8,600, I think his price is right. I actually think he could have been priced higher, His ball striking has been outstanding. He regressed a little bit with the putter last week. He's normally not a good putter. When he was winning and having all those great results, he was putting well. I mean, just looking at the daily results, on Sunday he gained strokes putting. I do think he can find some of that putting form again. Even just a neutral putter puts Aaron Rai, in my opinion, into the top 10 in this tournament. But as well as he's striking the ball right now, I think Aaron Rai has a ton of upside. At 8,600, I feel like it's a value at this point. David, you got two here, but would love your take on Rai before you go.
I like this from the audience, which is Jody goes, of course, Joel. Welcome in, Jody. Great to see you here. Jody goes, of course, you're taking Aaron Rai after the audience was known on any tournament. And then Zach just goes, welcome to the show, Jody. Which is standard behavior. Look, no issues with Rai. The price is up there, which I guess makes it a little bit questionable with, it's a high caliber field. He has been putting in high caliber performances, but we did see the putter regress a lot last week, perhaps expected following the win. It was a huge week for him, got the PGA to a victory. Who knows how long the celebrations continued afterwards. So always happy to kind of forgive one performance and see how he goes this week as well. So I've got back-to-back selections here. My first, I am going to go who you might think is a bit expensive, but on the face of it, you look at his record and what he's been doing lately. Billy Horschel has been playing amazing golf lately. Second at the Open. Maybe you thought that was a flash in the pan. He came back with 7th at the BMW Championship, the 10th last week at TPC Southwind in the first playoff event. What I really like is he's a past winner at Muirfield. He won at Memorial back in 2022. He's got a multitude of other top 15s there as well. He's finished top 20 at the Masters before as well to his record. He's just playing excellent golf at the moment. The fact that he's got correlated form winning on a Jack Nicklaus course, I think that should actually factor in a little bit more than people are perhaps giving him credence for. You can get him as high as 40-1 in betting markets, which for me just seems absurd compared to some of the other names around him. Then my second selection, I'm going to go with Robert McIntyre. Go and grab some value, make sure that I lock one of those in because I don't want to be priced out of building a legitimate lineup here. Look, Bobby Mack excels on these courses where driving accuracy and driving distance combined really become a factor. He is a total driving package. The approach plays looked really good as of late. He's had 2 wins already this season at the Canadian Open and at the Scottish Open, 7th last week at the FedEx St. Jude. And then we look at what he's done at the Masters. He had a 12th on debut there and then the 23rd in 2022 as well. So he's got a great record around Augusta National. I do think that's a good correlation. He just seems too cheap for me, priced down in the lowly 6-7K range.
I think it's really interesting to take your strategy here, be a little bit more balanced, maybe not take one of the top studs. It certainly will make you unique, and there's plenty of upside there. So I think it's a really good approach to building a little bit differently, especially in a 50-man field. I am stalling for a minute on my pick. So Spence, I'd love to get your take on Billy Horschel and Bobby Mack.
Well, I'll say this. The Bobby Mack pick directly was a steal from David. There's so many comp trends in my model for why I like him. And then as far as Horschel is concerned, when we think of players that can get white hot, Horschel has done this in the past during this playoff stretch, and the form is starting to really peak from him. So I really like both of those two selections. It's put me in a little bit of a bind with McIntyre just because when I'm looking in that $7,000 range and trying to find actual upside candidates, he's always more boom or bust in my model. But we're talking about a no-cut tournament where there's 50 players with the high upside marks that McIntyre puts together. So, I've kind of been a proponent that I haven't necessarily been on him the last couple of weeks. And last week it burnt me a little bit going down that path. But I am every bit willing to bet on the upside that McIntyre has here.
I love it. All right. I'm up. I'm going to lock in my pick. So, audience, most of you I've seen on this show for a long time. I know you know the rules. I was going to take Grazeman because you are already claiming I've stolen picks. I will change my pick and allow you to have. I am going to default to because I know you guys need it, so I will help you, and I will allow you to then say the pick so I can't take him. So now you can now isolate the pick before I can get them. I will do you that favor because that's the kind of guy I am. I will pivot and take the better value play down there after I'm now giving you Grazerman, and I'm going to take Eric Cole. And Eric Cole is someone that we've talked about on this show. And the reality with Eric Cole is it's a similar thing, not quite to the extreme level as Wyndham Clark, but a similar sentiment of we've seen Eric Cole become one of the top players on tour, right? He hasn't been playing that way for most of this season, but that form is starting to return. And you want to catch the guy on the upswing. And since the end of June, his ball striking has been phenomenal. He's given us 3 top 10s. He got us 18th last week. The only real concern is he had a pretty bad week off the tee. If he can get control of that driver this week, I think you get another fantastic result for Eric Cole at 6,500. Audience, you are on the clock, and the pick is locked in super fast, and you didn't take Grazerman after I gave him to you. Little offended, but I get it. Dunlap locked in. Spence, would love your take on the last round, the last few picks, and then you're up with 2.
Cole's going to be popular. Cole continues to excel in my model. It's very surprising for a player that doesn't have accuracy, doesn't have distance. I would say the one benefit potentially here because of the unknown variables is the elevation and the downhill lies might actually end up helping somebody like Eric Cole if he can keep it straight enough and find the fairways there. I'm not going to personally be on Nick Dunlap. I understand he's a high upside sort of a candidate to consider, but he's going to be very popular down in that $6,000 range. There's other routes that I would rather go. As I move forward to try to make my pick here, it's very difficult because as we've talked about, it's a 50-man field and there's only so many value pockets of where I am trying to actually land into these positions here. So when McIntyre goes off the board, it really recalibrates what I am trying to do here. So I am going to build a lineup that I think is every bit GPP large field contest worthy, and kind of we'll have this conversation about some of these golfers that are contrarian routes to take. It's not necessarily going to be the safest route to go for a 4-person contest here, but the number one leverage play that I have on the board, and I'll start with this and I'll kick it back to you guys afterward, just so I have a second to figure out the second pick here. But I'm going to take a golfer that I never find myself on. And anytime that I ever have, I've always made this comment, but I really like Denny McCarthy's profile. This is a golfer for me, number one expected weighted putting, which, I mean, that's an almost every week answer for him, and that's fine. But I ran inside of my model 7 categories. It takes recent strokes gain total. It takes long-term strokes gain total that gears towards the course. It takes comp courses. It takes Nicklaus courses, elevation scoring, scrambling. There were 9 players that graded inside of the top 28 for every single one of those categories. All of those names, for the most part, are the favorites in this tournament. The one name that fit that threshold that I was looking for that was not is Denny McCarthy at 7,400. It doesn't mean that he necessarily has a ton of high-end marks. He is number 1 for putting. He is 3rd for scrambling. But I think McCarthy's accuracy here can actually play really well. And I see virtually no ownership in comparison to what a lot of these other guys are. Like, I have fringe 6%, and that might even be pushing it to an extent. So I'll take McCarthy. I'll let you guys talk about it I don't expect anybody to necessarily be on him because he's pretty contrarian, but I'll let you guys talk about him for 1 second, and then I will fire into the next pick.
Well, I was going to touch on a point that you were starting to say, which I totally agree with, especially in this tournament, a 50-man field where everyone makes the cut. And because it's the FedEx playoffs, every golfer in this field is at least above average, right? They're all capable. Ownership plays a bigger factor this week than most. You can find a golfer this week with low ownership. Like we said, they're mostly all capable with some upside, and they hit. That's what's going to make the difference. And so I think a guy like Denny McCarthy, who you're seeing with very low ownership, that is a value and a boost because we know we've seen Denny McCarthy have those big weeks, and the ownership is going to make your lineup different from the field. David, we love your take.
I think with the position that Spence was in, once Bobby Mack is off the board, Denny McCarthy is probably your next best value within that sort of 7,300 to 7,800 kind of range. So I think if you need for within that spot after Robert McIntyre, Denny McCarthy is a fine choice and definitely playable.
Boom. I love it. All right, Spence.
All right, so this wasn't necessarily the route I was planning to go when this show started. This is a golfer I like a lot, though, where I feel like as an entire show, we've been pretty bullish on him, and former number one amateur in the world, a golfer that has demonstrated elite upside, a golfer that it's won recently that has been tipped on this show. I'm going to go with Davis Thompson at 7,900. I understand the 12% ownership. That's going to probably be the most popular outside of, I would think, Taylor Pendrith, probably. I would him and McIntyre are kind of a coin flip for me, one way or another. So if I can't get McIntyre, I feel pretty confident backing the ball striking ability that Davis Thompson does have. It's not necessarily a perfect profile. There's like the direct comp course answer placed him 37th out of 50 players. But if you look at any of the recent strokes gain metrics, he was 6th in this field when just running it for any course. So, this is a young golfer that's getting better every single time that he tees it up, it feels like.
I love it. I think that's a really good pick. He does have a lot of upside. We saw him get that really hot streak. This does also seem like a week where he could get hot and get you a good result. I like the way your lineup is coming along. The audience with a quick pick already in it as well. Pendrith. Audience, great pick. I liked Pendrith. Pendrith is on my list. He was something I was planning to take from my lineup as well, so I will give the audience a steal on that one. David, would love your take on both of Spencer's picks and Taylor Pendrith.
Pendrith obviously has made some huge gains on approach lately, so I think I can absolutely understand the appeal because he's just doing so well with his iron striking, and his ball striking has been off the charts. So there's no denying that. Typically an area that's been weak for Pendrith at the top half of this year, which, it's always a positive thing when you see that correlation change. My concern comes with, we're seeing him pushing 15% ownership. Do I really want to pay up for a 15% owned Taylor Pendrith when there's probably other names that I'd rather take in that range? I'm not too sure. And so I guess that's where my question mark kind of comes in with Pendrith. I think Davis Thompson, great upside for Spence there, real all-round driving package. So I'm weighting pretty heavily on both driving distance and accuracy within my models this week. Even though it is 8,100 on paper, we've spoken about the fact that the ball flight's going to be longer. But there are still a number of par fives that you're going to need to reach into. There's a couple of options to drive par fours here as well. So that extra driving distance can still be an asset despite it not actually playing that 8,100 yards, probably being more around that 7,300. Doesn't mean I'm not completely discounting driving distance. Thompson has both strengths as well. And I think that's the right way to kind of approach it, is looking at those total driving numbers.
Boom. All right. Well, you know what? Audience, I gave you every opportunity to take Grazerman. You didn't take him. So now I'm taking him. So I don't feel bad anymore. I gave you 2 chances at it. You passed. And you were onto something. He's a good value play. I mean, if you deep dive into it a little bit further, he's been an absolute tear. Now, the ownership's going to be a little bit high, but I'm okay with stomaching that ownership at this low of a price. He had one of his worst ball striking weeks last week since July. But the putter has been unbelievable. He's got control of that driver, and he's been consistently striking the ball well before last week. I think he rebounds. He finds that form this week and has another good result. A top 20 from Grazerman this week would be a great finish for his price. It's just too cheap for the way he's been playing over the last 2 months. So I'm betting on the form and the price here with Grazerman. And even though the ownership is there, I'm looking at about 17%. In a 50-man field, I don't even think that's that high. I'm okay with 17%. I would be turned off if it was in the mid-20s, but at 17, it's higher than others, but it's stomachable for me. David, would love your take on the last couple picks, and then you got 2.
Yeah, look, the question for me with Grazerman is we saw him just throw away that victory at the Wyndham and then kind of expectedly came out with sort of like a middle of the road performance at the FedEx St. Jude. So the question for me comes, do I want to see a situation where Grayson like kind of gets over that mental hurdle of what he did at the Wyndham, like basically choked the victory away? Is there a situation for me where he comes out into a tournament, he puts up a top 10, he gets some of that confidence back, and then I'm sort of willing to get back on the Max Graceman train? Outside of that, I mean, the other narrative is before the choke, he was playing just incredible golf, and like he looks like a proper kind of all-round golfer. So he does have great upside. Little concerned of the ownership, little concerned of the mental fortitude and what aspect that's going to play. I'm going to go and I'll pick up Tony Finau here very happily. So obviously Utah native, very, very used to playing at high altitude, perhaps most experienced in the field. You know, there's going to be a lot of work here for both the golfers and the players in terms of accounting for the changes in clubs that they're going to need to make when it comes to altitude. Like, so don't forget that factor of a lot of these shots are going to be a club to a club and a half length than what they're usually used to playing. And there's some algebra that needs to be done by these caddies and these golfers in terms of working that out. Tony Finau as well, he's got 3 top 10s at Augusta National, so obviously that's a huge positive if we think there's going to be a correlated course. The Memorial finished 8th earlier this year, 8th last year, 8th in 2020 as well, and then at the Shriners he's finished 9th and 7th in the past as well. So he's got good acumen, he's playing very, very good golf, lots of experience at high altitude. So very happy to take him here off the back of the 16th. The putter has looked really good lately for him as well, which is always the thing for Tony Finau. He changed his putting grip earlier this year, and a lot of people kind of picked up on it. They got on board the Finau train. He didn't reward them with a victory. Well, those changes with his putter are still there. Like, he's gained putting for his last 6, 7, 8 tournaments. Like, he's putting well. He's ball striking well. He's definitely got the upside to go and win. So I'm happy to take him in 9,700 here. For my value pick, a number of these have been stolen. I really would have liked Nick Dunlap, who opened at 175 to 1 and got narrowed into 75 to 1. So he's great value down at 6,900. Where am I going to go with this one? I've got to take someone in the 6K range in order to fill something out that's viable. You guys want to talk about Finau for a second while I just compare 2 players?
Yeah, I'm with you on Finau. I think you made a lot of good points. I was planning to take Finau with one of my last picks because I had money left. And to your point, you know, he has found some consistency, which we haven't seen from him recently before, where he's consistently showing up. Like, the old Tony Finau would be a week or two, and then he'd be gone for a while, and then another good week or two. But he's been giving you consistent top 20s, and he's been showing up week in, week out, and he's not busting. So I think he is turning a corner to being a much improved, more consistent golfer. And I think that could show up this week on the course.
Yeah, I do really like his chances. I'm honestly quite surprised that I was able to pick him up where I was in terms of the draft order today. I'm going to go back down the board, perhaps predictably, but kind of have to at this point. And I'll take Sepp Striker at 7,100. I'll bet on the upside that we know that Sepp Striker possesses. Not his best result at the FedEx FedEx St. Jude Championship, where he is a pretty popular golfer as well. So as a result of that, you are getting a good discount on his ownership. The approach play still looks decent enough. Now, he was 5th earlier this year at Muirfield. Jack Nicklaus design, he was 16th there the year before. He also notched up a 16th at the Masters earlier this year. So I do like his performance on comp courses. He's just a golfer that I know when you give him 4 rounds, he has got the ability to go out there and shoot a 62 and a 63 at any time. I love the upside that you get with Striker. And if everyone's going to kind of be off him off the back that he was very popular at Southwind and he kind of disappointed, you know, I'm getting like 6.5% ownership on Striker, which in a 50-man field is very, very low. I'm happy to bet on his upside here and hope for a turnaround in form.
And this does feel like one of those weeks where it could be like a Straka pop week where he hits them well, and we know he shows those, where he has those performances where he comes through. That could be a really sneaky pick there. With my pick, I'm taking a guy that is probably considered one of my guys. It is no surprise probably who I am taking here. Some might say, hey, he looks to have been regressing a little bit. The last 2 outings haven't been his best, but Sungjae Im has found something this year. Sungjae Im has been excellent at only 9K. I think he's almost at a discount. I think you could have seen him in the mid to high 9K range. And I think he bounces back this week. He hasn't missed a beat ball striking. You would have liked to see him hit the ball better off the tee last week. His around the green game wasn't his best, but those are his strengths. I think he gets that back. I think he's pretty consistent off the tee. I think he finds that the fact that the ball striking is still there is giving me a lot of confidence in getting another really good result from Sung Jae. Audience, you are up. It looks like a few nominations are in. We will need one more to get finalized. While we wait, Spence, would love your take on David's 2 picks as well as Sung Jae.
Let me start with Sung Jae. So I kind of talked about trying to find leverage on this board, and Denny McCarthy being one of those names that was leverage for me. The second leverage option that I have on my sheet currently is Sung Jae. So I think there's a lot to like about Sung Jae there. I agree with David too about Finau. I'm kind of shocked when we look at projected ownership. I have him right now inside of the top 5 for projected ownership. So for him to be there at the 401 in the draft, I would have thought somebody would have taken him before that. A lot of the comp course narratives fit very well within the profile. The approach game is trending right now. He's second over his last 24 rounds. And then you look at the recent strokes gain total when I didn't weigh it towards any specific course, which is obviously going to weigh pretty heavily with that approach game. He's inside of the top 10 there. So, 7th on Nicholas courses. There's a lot of positive marks that are pushing in the right direction for him. So I think there are some examples that we've talked about where it's bad chalk. To me, Finau is good chalk in this situation. This is just a golfer that is trending in the right direction at the right time at a course that should suit his game.
Boom. There you have it. I'm definitely aligned with you on that one. And those are the types of insights where you kind of want to get an idea of, like you said, good chalk, bad chalk. Who are good chalk that you want to be able to take on? And like you said, you could always get different elsewhere as long as you don't just play all chalky players. That doesn't mean you have to avoid all popular players by any means. Audience, we still need you to finalize your pick. Plenty of nominations in, but we will need one more to finalize. While we wait, and Spence, you brought it up. Let's dive in a little bit on the last couple rounds. Are there any other, or I'll just ask you specifically, are there any other good chalk players that you want to highlight?
I mean, if we want to call McIntyre chalk at 12%, which is a little bit more popular, I think him and Davis Thompson are the good chalk of that section. So, I mean, I guess I'll take one of David's, one of mine there in the $7,000 range.
All right. Audience, again, we need that last pick in. I have give you guys about 10 to 15 more seconds, and then we're going to have to take someone for you. While we wait, David, I want to ask you the same question. Are there any players in the last couple of rounds that you are categorizing as good chalk?
I mean, obviously, I'll tout my own horn and say Tony Finau's good chalk. I think Wyndham Clark's good chalk as well. I think you can expect a good performance from him this week as well. Interestingly, I'm getting a lower number on Bobby Mack. I'm getting around 10%. If he does get up to 12, I still think that that's okay, just given the form that he's been playing and he's been playing very, very well. So I think that's an interesting option. I did really like Sanjay M from you as well, Joel, just to back up on that selection. I always like a situation where if you can discount one performance and everybody was on him and suddenly all the ownership has gone elsewhere, that doesn't just mean that golfer is suddenly like to be excluded from every single lineup that you're in. He's obviously played very well at the Masters as well, especially when he was on debut in a pretty iconic performance back in 2016, I want to say off the top of my head. He played very, very well at Augusta National too. So I think that those would be the key ones. It's an interesting tournament though, in terms of where the chalk is lining on a golf course that we're not going to know how it plays until they play it. I guess that's the main thing.
Yeah, we have a lot to learn this week. Audience, great job getting the pick in. Brian Harmon, interesting value pick here. Spence, would love your take on Harmon, and then you got 2 to finish your draft.
I think Harmon's playable. I have no issues with him. Kind of the way that I see my build right now is I have 7,300 left, and unfortunately, a lot of the routes that I would have considered, we only have 50 players, so there's only so many routes that you can go around with it. But it's the names like Bobby Mack. It's the potential option of a Brian Harmon to where it kind of removes me from that section naturally. and seems to put me into the spot where I would rather just be a little bit more, we'll call it the highest dollar amount I can get to and the bottom of the board if I can find a name that I like. I'm going to start at the very bottom. To me, there are two options down here that if you're looking for sub 7% plays, outside of like the obvious choices of like Grazerman and Eckroat, who are going to carry ownership themselves, and Eric Cole, which I don't have anything negative to say about those three. But if you're looking for the contrarian route to go of players that are not producing results right now, but have potential high upside within their profiles, it's to me Adam Hadwin and JT Poston. Now, you have to know what you're signing up for with both of them because the form has been hit and miss every single week. I faded Adam Hadwin in a matchup last week. I took Eric Van Rooyen against him. It's kind of been this boom or bust outlook from him in every single event, and it's more bust than it is boom. The one thing I've noticed about Hadwin specifically, and we can talk about any of the driving concerns that are going to come into play. I know this is mountain golf, and I know this is not desert golf, but when we have seen Hadwin frequently during this West Coast kind of swing, he's been one of the better golfers, and that also ends up molding into the range of any of these elevation courses. He was inside of the top 10 of my model in similar elevation and inside of the top 16 for me at Nicklaus courses in strokes gained total. So I know what I'm signing up for here. There's no ownership. I do think the ceiling potential is a little bit higher than the market is going to be placing us at. And with the inability to get to a Bobby Mack, I would kind of just rather go boom or bust here. So I will start with Adam Hadwin, and then it puts me in the spot where there's a couple names that make logical sense to consider. And I've talked about expected weighted driving for this course, and I'm going to give kind of a deep dive into what that answer means. So I ran it specifically of courses of Augusta, Muirfield, Vegas, like TPC Summerlin, any TPC Scottsdale, like any of those courses that kind of fit under that mold there of who are the biggest increasers in expected total driving. Number one on that list would be David's pick, Billy Horschel. Number two on that list, surprisingly, is a golfer that I'm not necessarily even on in Justin Thomas. I will leave 3 off for a second because 3 is the name I'm going to take. 4 is Will Zalatoris. And then you have this really close range of like the Nick Dunlaps, the Patrick Cantlays, Colin Morikawa. There is a golfer that I'm going to take here, and this is going to be no surprise to anybody who's ever tuned into this show. It is technically the last event of the season. That is not the finale at East Lake. I have not played Jason Day all that frequently this year. I know that the weighted approach numbers are going to look horrendous. He's 50th out of 50 players in my model in expected approach. The one caveat, though, that I at least want to throw out there is if you look at his finish last week of his 22nd place result, going into round 4, and I know the ball striking went south for him marginally, he was a projected top 5 producer in my model of what his fair result was on the leaderboard, and that was technically at a course. It's the same answer I gave for Bobby Mack that I didn't necessarily love him for. So now I get this course for Day, and I know Muirfield, we can use that example of why Day never finds success at Muirfield. I understand that, but it's in his backyard. He rolls out to the course in his boxers, essentially. We've seen the pictures of him in these booty shorts that I'd have to imagine is him coming out of bed there. But if you look at other comp courses, throw Muirfield out for a second, all of those other venues, Augusta, TPC Summerlin, they all start grading him as a top 12 expected performer. So I'm going to take Jason Day here. I don't feel comfortable with this. This is another leverage option where it's a higher ceiling play with a floor that has problems, but I thought he looked really good last week. That 22nd doesn't necessarily do justice to how well I thought he played.
Boom. There you have it. That is great intel to get you prepared. I, to be honest with you, Spence, was also considering Jason Day here with my pick. I ended up selling on someone else, but I was looking at Jason Day, and I think all the points that you made, there is, just despite the ball striking, which obviously is an issue, he has been playing good golf. If he can find anything with his irons, I think there's a lot of upside there with Day. So Day, an interesting pick. Would like to see how that one turns out. Audience, you are on the clock with the final pick. It looks like it is locked in with Sam Burns. Audience, way to get it done. Interesting pick Burns looks to be on the rise, and Burns is definitely a guy that plays in bunches. He gets hot. He does seem like be the right time to be playing him. 9,400, I thought was a little high, but he certainly can pay off that upside this week. I'm going to go ahead here with my last pick. I'm going to take Adam Scott to round out my squad. He's another guy who's been good form. He's been playing well recently. He maybe lost a few strokes ball striking at the FedEx, but he's been hitting the ball pretty well. He's been good on the putter around the green. He's just been playing a lot of consistent golf. At 8,300, I think there's plenty of upside. Even just looking at his last few outings, since July, he's given us a 2, 10, and 18. So a lot to like out of the recent form from Adam Scott. David, would love your
very quickly. I don't mean to interrupt, but very quickly before we move on, that's technically the other play I was considering in Adam Scott there. So I'm fine with either one of those two routes. I think they're both playable. Scott's technically going to be the one that is probably a little bit safer for a lot of the reasons that you just talked about.
Totally. But, to your point, what's interesting about that decision is that you're also getting much better lower ownership on day. So if you think they're close, there's probably in a big tournament, there's probably value on taking the shot on day. David, you got one here. Would love your take on the last round and how you're going to close out the draft.
I also really like the Adam Scott play. Obviously, he's past Augusta champion, 9th early this year at Muirfield. He's been in very, very good form, probably underrated for the way he's playing compared to where everyone's expectation of him is. I actually expected his ownership to be a lot higher. I don't mind Sam Burns. He's sneaky long off the tee. He's pretty straight off the tee as well. I think that with his salary, you are almost naturally going to get a decrease in ownership because he does seem priced up at 9,400. So the caveat, which is that all of that is that you then get a lower ownership number, which is a benefit. Jason Day, I'm like indifferent. I had one, but if you find yourself at 6,200, I'm not opposed to playing them in that situation. You're kind of just rolling your dice on a number of players, and we've seen that Adam Hadwin has the ability to possess some pretty good upside. And last week for President's Cup selections as well. So there's that kind of carrot for him to go out and perform well this week and impress Mike Weir, see if he can make a last-minute charge for the team in Montreal. Kind of naturally where I've fallen, my order here would have been Will Zalatoris, Nick Dunlap as the primary two selections. I can't take either of them. So next best in the line is Siwoo Kim. Hasn't displayed the best of form as of late. Earlier this season, he was great. He's played very well in Muirfield earlier this year and across his career. So 15th earlier this year, he was 4th the year prior and a 13th the year before that. So very, very good record on Nicklaus courses. He's got 8th at TPC Summerlin recently as well in 2023. So some experience playing at altitude. And he's got top 30s at the Masters the last couple of years as well, and a 12th in his history too. So look, as I said, would much rather have gone to Nick Dunlap or Will Zalatoris in this situation. I can't. So I'll go Siwoo Kim. I do think he possesses some decent upside. I think he's playable at that salary.
Siwoo Kim, 6,700 pick is locked in. Before we get out of here tonight, don't forget to hit the like button. Give us a follow. It goes a long way. Let us know which lineup you think is going to win. We'll come back next week. We'll crown a winner. Will we come back next week? That's actually a question. There might not be enough golfers for us to come back this week. But either way, there will be a winner. So let us know which lineup you like the most this week. But we're not done yet. Before we get you out of here, we will have our first round leader plays, and we'll start with David. David, who are you looking at in the first round leader market?
So I haven't actually got a first round leader play to give out as of yet. And the reason, and I'll reference to Jody in the comments asking about the weather updates, is because the weather still looks a little bit changeable. And so I just want to really nail down on the weather before I give out any kind of like information. You guys all know, or if you follow us regularly, or if you're in the Win Daily Discord, what a huge part weather can play in us getting an edge over the bookmakers. We're very, very strong on all of our models, and we use premium modeling on the back of that as well to make sure that we're getting the most accurate weather forecasting we can. Thursday's displaying some thunderstorms at the moment. I'm a little bit unsure how those are going to develop, when the high winds are going to arrive. So I haven't actually got first round leaders, but I have got a couple of matchups that I really do like and I want to give out. The first is Ludwig Oberg over Tommy Fleetwood, which you can get at $1.95. So American money, that's minus 105. I just think Ludwig's had a better year than Tommy Fleetwood. I think his performance on comp courses is also appealing. So I just really love the number there that you can get him. And Siwoo Kim, my last selection, as much as I prefer Dunlap or Will Zalatoris in that situation in a DFS perspective, at the moment, you can get plus money on Siwoo Kim over Max Homa at plus 100. Max Homa has looked absolutely dreadful, finished dead last at the FedEx St. Jude. You get plus 100 on Siwoo Kim to beat Max Homa over the course of the tournament, which for me is displaying a decent value. I have another couple of matchups. They'll be in the Win Daily Picks article that goes out. All of our experts fill in a spreadsheet. It all goes into an article on the Win Daily website. So make sure you jump into the description, grab that 50% discount code, get signed up because we've been on such a hot streak. It just is an absolute no-brainer at this point.
Boom. Don't forget it. You'll get the wins with us. Maybe even win daily. Spence, how about you? Do you have any matchups or first-round leader plays?
I'm going to give the same answer that David gave for the first-round leader market. Matchup-wise, unfortunately, the numbers are kind of dead at this point. I don't want to give something that's moved 20, 30 points. So if you tune into Win Daily, it'll be filled into the table there. I also want to say, Brent, if you write me on Twitter, I would love to see the Patrick Cantlay signed card. I know David and I both are, I don't know if you still are, David, but are into cards. And I have a Patrick Cantlay signed card that's from, I believe, Upper Deck, but I'd love to see the in-person signing of Cantlay if you can send that over to me.
Awesome. I love it. Well, I can't get you guys out of here without a couple first-round leader plays. My picks are really based on value at this point. Just guys, I think you're just getting a good number on. I'm going to give you three. I'm going to start with Billy Horschel at 30-1. The two I really like the most, I just think it's too big a number for their talent. Aaron Rai and Sung Jae Im, both at 35-1. I felt like they're just a tier below where they should be. Those are pretty big numbers for those guys. As we get clearer on weather and see how those breaks, if they feel like they're on the side of the weather edge, then that will certainly be the direction we will be heading. But don't forget, as David mentioned, if you haven't already, I know most of you, a lot of you who listen to our show already signed up for Win Daily. Get in Discord. There will be weather updates posted. We'll have Steven's ownership article to make sure you know what the ownership looks like. And of course, we give outright plays. You can see our picks in the grid and everything like that. Get involved. We're having a great season. We had a great season last year. You'll get the wins. It's a lot of fun. Don't forget to sign up. Did I forget anything?
I love the comment from Brian that make sure that you select a golfer who hasn't got a chubby caddy because it's a lot of walking at Castle Pines. So strokes gained, diet, strokes gained, no upsize is probably a great narrative to build some DFS lineups this week. I really appreciate all of Brent's intel, who's clearly been at the course and dropping some great information in the chat, which I'm sure if you want to go back and watch this video again, go read through what Brent's been dropping in the chat because there's some great information in there.
Brent, you the real MVP.
The real MVP.
Sports.